Okay, so to prove, to well, not to prove anything, but to talk about Macross II a little bit more, I took out the booklet that comes with the Blu-ray set, and so I'm gonna go through this and explain about the Marduk, because this booklet, I mentioned it in the super long video yesterday. It has a lot of extra goodies in there. One of the things it has in there is like an explanation of the hierarchy and how the formation of the Marduk language works and all that stuff. Well, this is about the actual. This is like a continuation of Macross II. That this is written. I didn't put the top part. Though there's like a couple lines at the top of the page that kind of explain this situation. And it's a researcher who they gave this researcher name, and this is 10 years after the events of Macross II. So they're adding in some extra storyline within the booklet. Okay, this part is only about a page and a half, and then the bottom half of this on the right side of the page actually goes into starts the explanation of the Marduk language and stuff, which I'll do another time. But I wanted to, because people don't know about the Marduk, because they don't have access to the Japanese Blu-rays or anything like that, I thought that I would go through and explain about the cultural aspects and how they evolved, okay? Because this is actually vitally important to, because it all connects together. And like I said in my huge long 1 hour video yesterday, how the people are forgetting about Macross II, and they don't understand how it connects to the rest of Macross. This page and a half that I took pictures of it, and I'm gonna go through all 3 pictures and explain everything. This is going to show you how it's all connected, okay? And it'll explain more into the things that people don't understand about the show itself, and about the Marduk. I had wanted to do this video some time ago, but I've been busy on my other platforms talking about other stuff. So I wanted to go into the nuts and bolts, you can say, the details of the Marduk a little bit. They go beyond just what was in the TV show. So, in the TV show, or in the OVA actually, it's not a TV show. In the OVA, the Marduk, just to give a quick summary, nothing super serious. They are a warlike people. Mikimoto actually, when he did the character designs, he designed them to look kind of Native American, and he did that very, very much on purpose. Why is that important when you think about the later Macross? Let's think about Macross 0, the Mayan, right? So you're starting to see some connections here now, right? Which I'm sure Kawamori is very aware of this. And this actually has some very important repercussions when I go into the later parts of this. They are a warring people, but they are micronized. They are human size. They are not Zentradi size. So, but this is going to get into more detail when I get into the next part of this about the Marduk. This is extremely important when, you know, I get to the next part. Anyway, so people who've watched the series should already know who the Marduk are, and that there's basically a dictator ruler, Inks, who basically rules over everybody, and they all have to submit to him. The one thing is that the soldiers are actually, like, if you look at the way the emulators are treated in Macross II, they're, especially the way Fef and Ishtar kind of are, right? You can see the relationship about how the soldiers of the Marduk are very respectful towards the emulators, because without the emulators they can't control Zentradi. But they have to show a level of respect to them that the only person who is technically really above them is Ings. So that should be an idea of kind of the hierarchical scale of the Marduk a little bit. So I want to go into this. So this is like what is that? Not an afterword. What is the opposite of afterword in a book? I forgot. Anyway, so the first part. 謎の種族マルデュクと我々人類が接触してすでに10年が経過したが、未だに2つの文明の交流は進んでいない。So it's been 10 years since they've had contact with the mysterious race Marduk. But there's been no moving forward with the with more, you know, interaction between the two cultures. 初めの接触があのような不幸な始まり方をしたことが今に至るまで大きな影に投げかけていることが否定できない。だが、それ以上に問題なのは言葉の壁であると言えよう。So, so because of the first contact being such an unhappy beginning, that you could say that was a you can't deny that had a very lasting, a very strong effect. It threw a strong shadow on the relationship until this point. But the bigger problem is the language barrier. Okay, so 翻訳システムが進んでいるからコミュニケーション上不都合はないという若い士官も多い。しかしその安易な姿勢こそが2つの文明の相互理解を防げなっているではないだろうか。So for this one is they've got the translation system, so there is a way to communicate with them. So it's not like so there is that, but then there's also a lot of young officers that don't have any problems with this. But the could it possibly be the stance between the two cultures is preventing more communication or more understanding? いやしくも東郷軍士官であるなら日常会話程度のマルル語はマスターし、翻訳システムを使わない生の文化交流を心がけてもらいたい。So, what they want, what this researcher, there's a specific name, I don't know if I've got his name on here, in this picture, but he thinks that the best way that he wants these officers within the military to spend the time to actually master the daily conversation of Marduk language, so that they can have without using any kind of translation system, they can have direct communication with them. So so you can see there is, like, beyond the show, there is a lot of things here that, you know, compile into this extra information. Okay, so he wants them to put more effort into having a cultural relationship with the Marduk without any kind of translation systems or anything like that. So next part. So what are the Marduk? Part 1. So let's continue. マルルクは文化を持たないゼントラリーや壮大な文明を誇りながらも滅び去ったプロトカルチャーと異なり生きた文化を我々に提供してくれる唯一の存在であると言える。So, the Marduk are different than both the culturalist Zentradi and the, you know, the race, the protoculture race that became extinct, and they're what they believe is that they take the living culture and that's all they have is their culture, right? Then ことに我々は注目すべきは彼らはゼントラリーと異なり多くのプロトカルチャーの文化を吸収していることにある。So, where they need to focus on, where you should focus on is that unlike the Zentradi, they've absorbed a lot of the protoculture's culture. So, like with the Zentradi, they were created and you know, they went through, you know, cloning procedures in order to continue their race, basically. But what's different is that the Marduk actually had contact with, like, the protoculture ruins and things, and they actually absorb that culture. So, what does that tell you about their, you know, their race as a whole? Is that unlike humans and unlike Zentradi had no, you know, connection to protoculture. They had only heard about it, and they just say that they were the ones that made us, basically. That's all they knew. And with humans, they were created through protoculture doing genetic engineering. But the Marduk actually absorbed directly from protoculture. So, 彼らの言語を知るにはこの部分をよく理解しなければならない。So, in order to understand their language, we have to understand that part of their culture, is the language. They have to understand the language. Because even in the few scenes that Inks was in Macross II, in the OVA, is that they said that he says that they are the rightful, the rightful rulers of the protoculture, race, culture, technology, or whatever, right? That's what they believe. Hey, didn't you hear about that in Macross Delta? The Windermere people, they thought that because they had, they were able to connect to all these different ruins in that particular part of the galaxy, that, with Ragnar, Windermere, and all these other places, that, and because they had that big, the Signa Valance, or whatever that big giant ship was, and because of the Hoshinu Taite DNA and all that other stuff, and Kazanu Taite, which is, you know, the young king of Windermere, they believed that they were the rightful, especially Lloyd in particular, believed that the Windermerean people were the rightful owners of the protoculture, of the technology and stuff like that. The Marduk believed the same thing. See, you're starting to see some connections here now that you're getting more information. Then, 彼らは頭髪マルドゥクは プロトカルチャーの正当な文化継承者であり、その言語も正当なプロトカルチャー語であると主張してた。So, what the Marduk were pushing is that their language was protoculture language and that they were the rightful, descendants of the protoculture race. しかしその後の研究でこれは誤った伝承であり、マルドゥクはその支配改造に当たるまで全トラリであることが判明している。So, this is incredibly important. But in the research after that, we've discovered that was a mistaken legend, and that the Marduk actually were under the protoculture and were actually Zentradi. Originally they were Zentradi. Getting good, isn't it? はい。ではなぜあれほど語彙の持ちプロトカルチャー的な文法化しするのか。So, then why are they able to use the protoculture grammar in their language? Okay? 最新の学説では彼らは単なる全トラリの辺境艦隊の一部であり、何かのきっかけで文化を知り、それ以降宇宙の各地をさまよいながら様々なプロトカルチャーの文化跡跡を吸収し、独自の体系に組み込んでいたと言われている。Okay, so let's go back here. So, in the new theory is that they were just one part of a Zentradi fleet, but for some reason they learned about culture, and then after that they were going around space, just wandering around space, and they bumped into various protoculture ruins, absorbed that, and then they created their own bodies, their own body structures and things like that. また彼らが初めて文化を存在を知り、マルドゥク文化を独自に作るのに地球のタイムスケールではるかに数百年しかかかってないと驚くべき学説も立てられてる。So, this part is actually incredibly important. From the first point that they learned about culture until they were able to create their own Marduk culture in the time scale of the Earth was only a few hundred years. So, they learn about protoculture. They go to various protoculture sites and they develop their own culture. It only took them a few hundred years on an Earth time scale, which, if you think about the way the humanity on Earth developed after the protoculture, did their genetic tinkering, it was over 20,000 years, I believe, or it was more than that. I can't remember. It's from Do You Remember Love, where they explain this. When Hayase and Ichijo are on the on the protoculture city, and that's where they explain all that. So you can see all these connections are starting to make sense now, right? So they've bumped into a whole bunch of protoculture ruins, which directly relates to, in Macross 7, them finding the protoculture ruins on rocks and actually talking directly to protoculture person with Exodor there. And then you have in Macross Frontier where you learn about protoculture and the Baja and how they relate to all that. And then in Macross Delta you have, in this one part of the galaxy, all these ruins just everywhere, and they all connect into the protoculture, like the full network. So you can see what they did was, and this is where in the OVA they talk about how I don't remember if it was Fef or it was Inks that said this in it was episode 4 or 5 that they do this in Macross 2, where they talk about how they find a culture and they destroy it and they absorb it, right? That's the protoculture stuff. So you can see now they're connecting all of this. And now you can see how Delta connects very close to Macross 2. And how all of this stuff is connecting together, okay?彼らが配下に収めた全トラリを押さえつけるため、文化による絶対的階級性をつき、そのシステムを強化するために独自の言語体系を確立している。So from here, in order to control the Zentradi that were under them, using culture, they had to have a strict class structure, and in order to strengthen that system, they had to create a very special language. Okay, and what this is so the top is Shihaisha. So Shihaisha is the top person, which would be Inks in Macross 2. And then on the left side is your cultural protectors, your soldiers, and your citizens, your regular citizens. And then on the right side, which is separate, they still have to obey the dictator or ruler, right? But there are two levels here, and that is the mothers, the mothers who teach the songs to the emulators, which here's the emulator. Utamiko is here, which is the emulator here. These are like in the show. There's Erinche, who's trying to make Ishtar get cleansed of the evil culture that she came into contact with, right? That would be the Erinche class of women, and then there's the emulators, which are the actual singers. So this tells you the strict cultural structures. Now I'm not going to go into the language stuff because it gets really, really convoluted, and there's actually a section on the next page that goes deeply into the grammatical structure of the language and all that other stuff. So what I wanted to show in this video is all these connections to the other Macross series. So just like when the ASS-1 ship crashes on Earth, and then, you know, humanity discovers aliens, and there's alien race out there, and then the Zentradi come to Earth and, you know, destroy it and all that other stuff. That allowed Ichijo and Hayase to learn about protoculture and to, you know, find out about what was actually there on Earth before, you know, all the humans were there, right? And that was the first time humanity actually had contact with protoculture. But at that point, the Marduk had already, you know, absorbed protoculture, had created their own, you know, culture and class structure and all this other stuff. And they had learned through protoculture how to control the Zentradi through song. Why is this important? Think about Anima Spiritua from Macross 7, Basara, right? And I'm going to connect this together because I want people to see how important Macross 2 is, how it's all connected, and that this makes it canon, okay? Macross 7, Anima Spiritua was created by the protoculture because the Zentradi and Meltrandi were fighting too much, So the protoculture created the Ebiru, which are now known as the Proto-Devlin, and they got out of control and were sucking up all the Speedicha from everything, and they wiped out about 85% of the protoculture, but they also did a lot of damage to the Zentradi and the Meltrandi too. Well, the protoculture needed to put them away because they were too dangerous, so that's why they had the Anima Speedicha. The thing is that in Macross 7, it's only Basara who's Anima Speedicha, right? In my previous video talking about why Macross 2 is canon, I mentioned the book that I have, the special like deep dive book for Macross that has Macross 2 in it. One of the things in the protoculture era, in the timeline that they write specifically, they say Anima Speedicha Tachi. Tachi is a plural, meaning there were many Anima Speedicha at the time. So they were able to lock them away on that planet, right? But then, because they did that, the Zentradi and Meltrandi went out of control again. And that caused the end of the protoculture race. They eventually couldn't escape and they were wiped out. Or they either left the galaxy or they disappeared or something happened, right? And that also connects to Delta. Because if you think about, like, I want to connect it to Zero as well, because the phrase that Lloyd uses to control Mikumo in Macross Delta is Mayan. Well, where's the Mayan stuff come from? It comes from the Mayan island from Macross 0 and Saranom and Maonom, right? And their small island there that were keeping an eye on the Tori no Hito, right? Which means that because Windermere discovered they had protoculture, and they had a long history of protoculture, it's just that they have very short lives, and protoculture like kind of played with that. I will get into that at another time, because there's a Japanese language video that I saw that goes into more detail about the Windermere people. But the thing is that if you look at the drawings from Macross 0, those hieroglyphs that are from protoculture about Tori no Hito, when you see the Hoshi no Itaite slab come down in the Macross Delta, it has similar hieroglyphs, right, about the Hoshi no Itaite. Now if you take that and you take the designs of, like, on Ink's giant mothership thing, this is why that ship looks exactly like Bulldoza's ship from the first Macross, and from Do You Remember Love, is because the Marduk are originally Zentradi, so they had that look, and that's why those ships look similar. But they also are very different because they were micronized, they were human-sized. And so because the Marduk were able to they, like the Windermere people, knew about their, like, the Windermere people had the protoculture as part of their history, you know, going back a long time. The Marduk discovered it. They were Zentradi who discovered culture before, you know, while the other Zentradi and Meltrandi were all fighting each other because that's all they knew how to do. The Marduk had already discovered culture, so they had a similar position, is that they had the Zentradi kind of, you know, desire for war, but they also felt that because they had absorbed so much protoculture that they that they were the rightful owners of the new protoculture, right? The Windermere people, Lloyd, also believe the same thing. Windermere has Hoshi no Taite, so they are the rightful owners of protoculture because they can connect to the, you know, the full network and all this other stuff. Similar things, goes about different ways. The thing is that, you know, because the Marduk are just basically Zentradi with different, and Meltrandi in different ways, they have long lives, right? Whereas for reasons I'll get into in another video, the Windermereans are very short lives. And it has to do with the runes, right? The little things on in their hair, right? But you can see through this explanation, they're explaining how the Marduk actually are how they absorbed protoculture. They learned that songs were a way to control the Zentradi through their, going to these different ruins, which is, so it goes back to Do You Remember Love, how the song Aya Obete Masu, the song Do You Remember Love, was what is it? It was a protoculture song that actually awakened culture in Zentradi, and Bordoza was actually didn't want that to happen. He just wanted to use it to destroy the Meltrandi. Well, the people, the Zentradi and Meltrandi who were at that battle, all changed sides and they joined the Macross, and they joined, culture, right? Because they didn't have culture. What was different was that this is just a little theory crafting, but because the song that Bordoza had, the little tune that he had, along with the words that Hayase found in the city, the song was a love song. Why is that important? Because a love song created a feeling of happiness in the Zentradi who were in the Zentradi and Meltrandi at that battle. So they wanted to have peace. But the Marduk, in their travels around finding songs, found a way to use songs to mind control people. Now, why is this important? Delta. The Val syndrome. What is that? It's a mind control device. And using the Hoshino Taite and using all the ruins, was able to create the fold network and put everybody under a single consciousness. That was mind control. Right? Similar things. You can see where these parallels are coming in. This is why Macross II is canon, okay? There are too many connections to everything else, especially now with Delta. Delta adds so much to the canonization of Macross II. I mean, it was never non-canonized. It was always canon, but you can see how the connections in Delta now make Macross II extremely strong in the Macross universe. It makes the Marduk extremely important because it tells you of a different evolutionary scale depending on who got culture first. Because humans had love songs, they were able to create a peaceful environment, whereas the Marduk, as warring Zentradi originally, micronized, learned about songs, and were able to turn them into weapons of war. This is why Macross II is so important. Like, you can look at, Yamikure or whatever, but Yamikure is different because it's using an AI system, the Sharon Apple AI system, to, basically jam other songs. It's not like an attack, right? The songs the Marduk have are specifically meant for war. And they mention this all the time. Ishtar mentions it many times in the show, is how the Marduk are a people of war, and they use songs for war only. They never knew about love songs. This is where the evolutionary gap happens, and the cultural evolution the cultural evolutionary differences happen between the Marduk and, let's say, the Zentradi after Do You Remember Love, or even humans. Is that humans are created to create a peaceful environment, and so that the protoculture could live in peace, right? Except they put Tori no Hito on Earth so if humanity messed up and started fighting again, Tori no Hito just wipe them out. Whereas the the Zentradi learned about culture through Minmei's songs, and Minmei's, happy love songs and things, and that gave them a sense of peace, and it made them want to not fight anymore. The songs that the Marduk found were songs of war, and because of their warring, DNA, they were able to, and that identity of war being Zentradi and Meltrandi, they were able to, create their own culture of war that was beyond what the Zentradi were and the Meltrandi were. They were just drones fighting a war amongst each other. The Marduk actually created a culture that used the Zentradi to fight their battles for them, but also it created a social hierarchy for them, and it strengthened that warlike side of the Zentradi DNA that they had in them, right? So now you can see the connections. I wanted to make this video because I wanted people to see just how in-depth actually Macross II is and how important it is to the evolution of the protoculture lore. Okay, so that'll be all for this video. I will do more stuff on the Marduk and stuff in Macross II, and I might do some stuff on Delta, because Zetairai, I saw it, I know about it, I have all I have source stuff here, like the pamphlet, the movie pamphlet and stuff like that. I may go in to do some more stuff about that. What I want to do, I think in the next video I do on Macross, is going to be the chronology, because I have the book that I have has the entire chronology from the Big Bang to the protoculture era to the end of protoculture to the humanity era, and everything up to Macross II and what happened in Macross II. So, but I wanted to get this video out of the way because I wanted people to see that this Macross II fits completely in there without any retconning, without anything. You don't, and this is like a page and a half out of a booklet from the Blu-ray box, okay, that expands on and connects it more to what's going on. And keep in mind that this Blu-ray set came out before Delta was made, okay? This Blu-ray set came out in 2014. Delta wasn't on TV until 2016, okay? So, and then I think the first movie was 2017, and then they did Zetairai last year, so it was like a 4-year gap in between the two movies. Keep that in mind. This is all information that's trying to connect Macross II to everything up to Frontier and Sayonara no Tsubasa, the second movie. Okay? Delta expands on this, actually makes the connections tighter. Okay? So, that's all for this video. I will do more Macross lore videos in the future, so keep an eye out for those.